Hi guys. I think a lot of students have a little trouble figuring out aspiration, especially if it's an online course and you don't have someone explaining it to you. So I thought I would do a little screencast to go over aspiration so you know what it is, why we do it, and where it occurs in the words when you're doing your transcriptions. So we've got that little superscript H that we need to put in at times in our transcriptions. So what actually does that superscript H indicate on our transcriptions? What is this aspiration thing that we're talking about? Well, aspiration is a little puff of air, an extra puff of air you get on certain consonants. So if you say the word pill and put your fingers in front of your mouth, you should feel a big puff of air on the P on pill. If you say the word spill, on the other hand, and put your fingers in front of your mouth, you should not feel any kind of puff, or not nearly as strong as when you say the word pill. So we get a puff of air on pill, but not on spill. Why do we get a little puff of air on pill? What is going on there to create aspiration? It's the result of this phenomenon called voice lag. So that is a lag or delay in the voicing of the sound that comes next. So the sound that comes after the aspirated sound will always be a voiced sound, but there's a delay in the voicing. I'll explain that a little bit more a little bit later. Where do we get aspiration? It's only on pataka. That's where we find aspiration. So you need to look through your transcriptions. Whenever you transcribe one of those voiceless stops, pataka, there's the possibility that it will be aspirated. Not always aspirated, but quite often pataka in your transcriptions will be aspirated. But when? Because it's not all the time. When do we aspirate pataka? If the pataka is at the very, very beginning of the word, or is at the very, very beginning of the stressed syllable of the word. So again, I'll explain that again a little bit later. When do we never do aspiration? We never do aspiration if we find an S in front, right? So we did spill and you don't get a big puff. So if there's an S in front of pataka, the S negates aspiration and we don't do it. So why is it just pataka that we do aspiration on? Why is it just these voiceless stops? Well, let's break it down. There are stops. Why on a stop do we get a puff? Well, because stops are sounds where we totally block the flow of air. So as we create a closure in the vocal tract, the air pressure can build up behind the stop. Then when we release the stop, a puff comes out because we need to block the flow of air in order to get this puff coming. But it's only voiceless stops. So we don't aspirate on a b, d, or g. It's only voiceless stops. We need it to be a voiceless stop because to create a voiceless sound, the glottis will be wide open. And we need that wide open glottis to allow the flow of air to come up from the lungs quickly without being impeded with the vocal cords in the way for a voice sound. So it has to be a voiceless sound. So then after we have the voicelessness of the initial stop, we always have the next sound in the word will always be voiced. And there's a delay in the voicing of that sound. The sound that comes after is always voiced because it will always be either a vowel or a sonorant consonant. And we just know that vowels are voiced and we know that sonorant consonants are always voiced. But there's a little bit of a delay in the voicing of the vowel. So here's some examples of words where we would aspirate patakas at the beginning of words. And it doesn't matter what comes next, if it's a vowel or a sonorant consonant, we always aspirate at the beginning of a word. Now, when we release the stop, the air flows freely, and then there's this delay in closing the glottis, narrowing the glottis for the voicing of the following sound. There's a little delay, this lag time. So we call that voice lag. So for a very brief moment in time, the whole vocal tract is wide open because you've released the stop, so you've opened up your mouth, and the glottis is still open for the voicelessness of the stop. So you have not narrowed the glottis yet. The mouth has been opened up from the stop, so the whole vocal tract is open, and you get this brief moment where the air can just shoot right through from your lungs out your mouth, and you get this puff. So here's a diagram from the textbook where it's the person saying pill. So for the P sound, the lips are closed, but the glottis is wide open for the voicelessness of the P. Then we release the closure. So the lips are opened up, but there's a delay in the voicing. So the glottis is still wide open. So you have this brief moment where everything's open and the puff shoots out. And then finally, we narrow the glottis for the voicing of the vowel, and that kind of traps the air and stops the puff coming further. And then that we carry on with the rest of the word there. Now, if there's an S in front, we speed up the closure of the glottis, and we don't have this wide open glottis on the release of the stop. So that's why we don't do it for S. So our review, where do we aspirate? Always, 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 if it's the very, very beginning of the word, like tail, kind, please. Always, 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 if it's the very beginning of the stressed syllable. So this is the tricky one, because you have to look inside the word to see if you are going to aspirate pataka if the pataka is the very, very beginning of the stressed syllable. So here are some examples. Depict, include, subtract, where pict, clude, tract are the stressed syllable of the word. And pataka is the very, very beginning. And it doesn't matter if there's another consonant after it, that's fine, as long as it's the very beginning of the stressed syllable, pataka. That means we can have up to 2 aspirations in a word, because you could have one at the very beginning of the word, and then you could have one later in the word if it's the beginning of the stressed syllable. So the word computer would have one on the ka and then one on the pa, because pewter, the pew, is the stressed syllable of the word. And just remember, if there's an S in front of it, you should never, ever aspirate. So spill, as I showed you earlier, we don't aspirate on the P there. A word like destruction, even though the T is near the beginning of the stressed syllable, it's not the very beginning. An S in front always negates aspiration. Yeah, so the presence that the existence of that S speeds up the closure of the glottis, so there's not a voice lag, there's not a lag in the voicing anymore. So we have no aspiration on the pataka if there's an S in front. Okay, hope that clears things up for you and you have an easier time finishing up your transcription exercises. Bye.